Did you ever buy a ShamWow thanks to this guy's infomercials?
Hi, it's Vince with ShamWow.
Thinking it would change your life, only to go back to exactly the way you were living a week later? Well, that's kind of what a lot of people do with interior design. They buy something that looks great online, bring it into their own home, and realize pretty quickly that it's just making their home look cheap. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 8 things that make your home look cheap and show you how to fix them so your entire home doesn't feel like a ShamWow. So acrylic furniture always looks clever at first because it feels light, it virtually disappears, and on paper, it sounds like the perfect solution for small modern spaces. But the second you start living with it, that illusion of grandeur starts to fall apart. Scratches show up immediately, fingerprints never stop, and scuffs catch the light in a way you can't ignore. And so what was supposed to feel sleek starts to look tired way faster than most people expect. And the biggest regrets often come from larger acrylic pieces like desks, consoles, and dining tables, because they often feel flimsy even when they're expensive, and instead of fading into the background, they reflect everything around them, which makes the room feel loud. So rather than calming your space down like a nice wood table would, they quietly make it feel unsettled. And acrylic dining chairs and dining tables are especially unforgiving. Some of them creak, basically all of them scratch, and over time, they lose that crisp clarity and start to look cloudy and worn, which is not a good look. And seriously, who wants to see everyone else's legs when they're sitting around the dining table? I don't want to see your feet under my plate, and you don't want to see mine either, so this is just a big miss for me. But if you genuinely love acrylic, it can work, but only when it's treated like a real material instead of like a disappearing act. So that means thicker pieces, rounded corners, and color. No more clear acrylic. You know, acrylic needs weight and restraint to feel high-end, and when it is used sparingly and in the right setting, it can actually look pretty refined. But when it's used just as filler or because it's trendy, that's when it normally looks cheap. Now, gray wood floors are one of those choices that feel safe in the moment, but they disappoint you almost immediately. So, gray wood floors are one of those choices that feels safe in the moment, but disappoint you almost immediately. The cool tone drains warmth from your space, and it just flattens everything sitting on top of it. And instead of feeling modern in the way that you want, it starts to feel like a renovation shortcut. Not a good look. And the problem shows up especially strongly in open spaces, because gray floors paired with white walls and minimal furniture just feels hollow and unfinished, even when everything is clean and new. And that's because there's no depth in the room. I mean, rooms like this just feel like a staged listing photo instead of a place where someone actually lives. And kitchens look extra bad with gray wood floors because the tone just fights with the cabinetry. The dirt and wear stand out more than you'd expect, and what was supposed to feel natural and neutral just ends up feeling overly manufactured and cheap. So trust me, this is one of those decisions people regret the instant they see it installed. So if you want a neutral floor, go warmer, not colder, because warmth is what gives a space depth, and even a subtle hint of warmth in a wood tone makes a room feel lived in instead of flat and staged. But cooler gray colors do the exact opposite. They drain contrast from your furniture, mute your fabrics, and make your entire space feel blah, even if you can't explain why. And your floors are the foundation of your home, so when they feel warm and believable, everything on top of them looks better by default. So next on the list are jewel-toned velvet sofas or button tufted sofas. And this is kind of 2 ideas in one, but you'll see why I do this in a second. So starting with the jewel-toned velvet sofas, they had a moment because they looked dramatic and bold in photos. But in homes, they just age fast. The color starts to feel heavy, the velvet shows wear almost immediately, and suddenly the sofa just feels way too over the top for the room. And instead of feeling high-end, it just feels forced and oddly cheap. Because deep button tufting is one of those details that looks expensive in theory, but also really dates your furniture. And when the arms, back, and seat are all heavily tufted, the piece starts to feel bulky and over-designed. And especially in white leather, every crease, shadow, and imperfection stands out, so your sofa quickly goes from a classic piece to something you'd find in a motel lobby on the outskirts of Miami. And the reason I'm talking about jewel-toned and button-tufted sofas together is that when you combine them, You're just stacking two very loud design moves on top of each other. And your sofa stops feeling like furniture and starts feeling like a costume for the room. And this instantly feels dated and just trying way too hard to look luxurious. So if you love velvet, that's totally fine. Just avoid the loud jewel tones. Stick to deeper muted colors like brown, olive, or rust, so your furniture still feels high-end without screaming for attention. And when it comes to tufting, leather is a much safer choice, because leather tufting ages much better over time and keeps the piece feeling like a designer classic instead of an overdone trend. Now, this is one of those looks that feels safe because it's clean and minimal, but when a home commits only to black and white, it just feels stiff and unnatural. I mean, there's nowhere for the eye to land, and nothing's softening the harsh contrast of this space. And so, instead of feeling good, it starts to feel like a staged real estate listing that's completely terrified of having any sort of personality. And even though you may think this looks good in photos, you really start to feel it after living there for a while. Having such high contrast everywhere makes the space feel harsh, because every edge feels sharper, every surface feels flatter, and the room just becomes visually exhausting over time. It looks bold at first, but it's not a space your body actually wants to spend time in, because, newsflash, the natural world is not black and white. So why would our bodies want to spend time in a space that is? And kitchens are probably where strict black and white fails the fastest, because pure white and deep black show everything. Fingerprints, dust, scratches, and every other sort of wear, and they've got zero forgiveness. And so what happens is, the moment it stops looking perfect, the whole space starts to feel cheap instead of clean, and what was meant to look modern quickly turns into something stressful to maintain. So if you like black and white, the fix isn't to abandon them completely, it's to stop treating them like rules and start thinking of them as anchors instead. Let one color lead and the other support, instead of forcing both to shout at the same volume. So a white space grounded by black accents feels calm and nice, and a dark space softened by white also feels pretty good. The problems only start when they're used at full contrast everywhere at once. And so the easiest way to make this work is by layering in warmth and texture. So natural wood, stone, linen, leather, these materials break up the harsh contrast of black and white and give your eye somewhere to rest. And even a subtle injection of warmth changes how the space feels in your body, not just how it looks. Because homes that feel expensive aren't extreme, they're balanced and easy to live in. And they give the eye and the nervous system a little room to breathe. So you might think ikat fabric looks fun and bold at first, especially when it's used on big pieces like chairs. But when the pattern is large, high contrast, and repeated in multiple places, it completely takes over the room and your space starts to feel noisy. So what felt playful at first quickly turns into visual clutter that you can't unsee. And when you use ikat in different variations, it looks like a themed set instead of a considered choice. And instead of adding character, it ends up flattening your entire room into a single loud note. And putting ikat fabric on larger surfaces like curtains is especially unforgiving, because the pattern is so graphic that it dominates the room whether you want it to or not. And over time, it feels heavy and overwhelming, especially in spaces you use every day. So you can expect this trend will be over soon, and your space will just look like the past. So if you like ikat, the fix isn't to remove it entirely, it's to choose the right color and let it play a supporting role in your room. And specifically, lower contrast, more muted versions are much easier to live with over time. And once the color is softened, ikat works best when it's outnumbered by solids and simple textures, so it adds a bit of visual interest without completely taking over the room. So when the pattern is balanced out with plain fabrics, woven materials, and other kinds of quiet finishes, your space will feel so much better. Now, number 6 on this list is furniture that's over the top with glam. And this is a perfect example of how reflective furniture crosses the line from looking polished into looking dated and cheap. Because here, the fully mirrored vanity, where they've even got a mirror sitting on top of the mirrored vanity, and all the symmetrical styling feels straight out of the early 2010s. There's no visual break, nowhere for the eye to rest, and just constant shine everywhere. But when everything reflects, nothing feels special, and it starts to look like an awkwardly designed showroom display instead of a real space. So this just signals over-styling and trend chasing, not good taste. Now here, even with a dark wall, this setup still leans too hard into glam for the sake of glam. The mirrored console, the crystal heavy mirror, and all the glossy surfaces are competing for your attention all at the same time. There's no restraint and no quiet material like wood or stone to balance things out. So this is the kind of space that photographs well at first glance, but quickly feels busy, theatrical, and tiring in real life, which is why this kind of look ages so poorly. And this shot shows how expensive finishes can really start working against themselves. Gold trim, black marble, ornate mirror frames, and all the decorative accessories pile up into a look that feels more like a hotel powder room that's trying way too hard than an actual person's home. It's so excessive because too many statement elements in one small area makes the space feel forced and performative, not natural and homey. So if you like glam, the fix doesn't have to be removing it, though I would generally recommend that. But if you really want to keep it, you just need to turn down the volume so it feels deliberate instead of theatrical. So just use some restraint. That means choosing one element that shines and keeping everything else calm. So one mirror, one metallic finish, one moment that catches and reflects the light. And if you want to make glam feel elevated, the best way to do it is to ground it with quieter materials. Wood, stone, plaster, matte paint. These give the eye somewhere to rest and stop the space from feeling like a showroom. Even something as simple as swapping a mirrored console for wood and keeping the mirror above it changes the entire tone of the room. Because homes that age well don't chase luxury, they subtly suggest it. And suggestion always feels more expensive than excess. Now, let's talk about barn doors. This kind of reclaimed sliding barn door might look charming at first, but the problems show up the longer you live with it. Because the distressed finish starts to feel forced, the hardware never seems to line up properly, and the door itself doesn't even fully seal. So instead of feeling good in your space, it ends up kind of feeling like a prop, something added for style points rather than function. And that is a trade you never want to make. And in areas like bathrooms, barn doors are even worse. They don't fully block sound or smells from exiting the bathroom, and they slide awkwardly instead of closing cleanly. And over time, the track they sit on collects dust and grime, and the whole setup just starts feeling flimsy. So what was supposed to look rustic just ends up looking cheap. And when you see this style used over and over, it starts to feel dated fast. The heavy distressing, oversized hardware, and mismatched wood tones just clash with any sort of cleaner finishes around them. So unless your entire home is leaning into that farmhouse look, the door just ends up screaming for attention in the wrong way. And as a general rule, anything that feels impractical or overly themed is going to make your home look cheap. So if you're drawn to sliding doors because of space constraints, or you just like the flexibility they provide, the answer isn't rustic barn hardware. It's choosing systems that actually integrate into your home. So if you're drawn to sliding doors because of space constraints, or you just like the flexibility they provide, the answer isn't rustic barn hardware. It's choosing systems that actually integrate into your home. And well-built pocket doors or minimal sliding panels both feel modern and well curated when they're done right. So now we need to talk about color overload, because this is such a common way to take a good-looking home and make it look cheap. And I want to show you a few examples in case any of these look familiar. This is one of those rooms where everything is trying to be the main character all at the same time. But when every surface, piece of furniture, and accent is bold and heavily saturated like this, your eye doesn't know where to rest. And that lack of restraint makes your space feel totally chaotic and also kind of childish, which does not give it an expensive feel. But let's be honest for a second. Nothing in this room is necessarily bad on its own. The issue is that every single element is asking for attention at the same time. The sofa is bold. The chairs are bold. The lighting is bold. And the art is bold. And even the small accessories are fully saturated. So there's no visual hierarchy at all. And because there's no neutral surface doing any grounding, your eye just keeps bouncing around the room looking for a place to stop. And when it can't find that place to stop, the space feels busy and oddly stressful instead of fun in the way it was designed to. And it also starts to feel more like a movie set than a place someone actually lives and relaxes in. And this is why I say it starts to feel juvenile, because when color is everywhere, it loses its impact. And then here, we've got a slightly different version of the same problem. The colors themselves are actually nice. Pink, blue, yellow, red, all of them can work. The issue isn't the palette, it's the density. You've got strong color on the walls, the bed frame, the bedding, the rug, the lighting, and the accessories, all compressed into this small visual field. But because everything is saturated in high contrast, nothing feels like a base layer. There's no visual floor for the room to sit on. So instead of the bed feeling like the anchor and the color supporting it, the color is the room. And that's why more refined rooms use color strategically, not constantly. And again here, the color overload crosses into something that feels more like a set than a home. And what pushes this one way over the edge is how the color is applied to the functional elements of the room. Because when cabinets, dining chairs, lighting, and decor are all bold at the same time, the space loses any sense of calm. But kitchens and dining areas especially need some visual stability because you spend so much time there. And without it, the room feels stimulating in a way that becomes tiring very quickly. Now, if you love color, you don't need to tone it down everywhere, you just need to decide where it belongs. Because well-designed homes keep their color concentrated, not scattered. One bold sofa, one expressive bed, and everything else stays calm so those pieces can actually shine. So with that in mind, pay attention to the backdrops of these images because they're doing more than you'd expect. Light walls, natural floors, and simple large surfaces give the color somewhere to sit. And that breathing room is what makes the space feel composed instead of busy. Because when every surface is loud, color loses its impact. But when color is framed by restraint, it looks so much better. So if there's one thread running through this entire list, it's this. Homes don't look cheap because the pieces inside them are cheap. They look cheap because the decisions they've made are loud, busy, and chasing impact instead of comfort. Because every example here starts with something that looks good on a screen, but ends with a space that's hard and awkward to live in. Too shiny, too busy, too trendy, too much all at once. But rooms that age well do the opposite. They're calmer, they're grounded, and they give your eyes somewhere to rest. The materials feel believable, color is used with restraint, and instead of trying to impress you immediately, the space just quietly works, day after day, without wearing you out. And once you start seeing design this way, a lot of decisions get easier, because you stop asking, does this look cool? And you start asking, will this still feel good a year from now? And that one shift alone saves you from most of the regrets people end up living with for years. So now that you know what not to do, and more importantly, why these decisions backfire, the next step is learning how designers decide what actually belongs in a room in the first place. So watch this video next where I walk you through a simple framework for navigating one of the most important design decisions everyone has to make.